Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy, GS Luke, here with our Round 2 Showdown stream for the Masters. Gonna get you ready for all your lineups on Friday with a look at the weather report, some of the strategy over there for Round 2 Showdown. We'll go through some shots gained metrics, try and find some diamonds in the rough over there for your lineups, and then wrap it up with some contest selection over there on DraftKings, as well as putting together a few lineups together to give you an idea of what to look for out there in your exposure. So by the end, hopefully you'll be an expert on everything that you need for tomorrow. But with any questions, any player deep dives that you guys want heading into the next round, go ahead, throw those down in the chat. And whether you're here on the replay crew or already a part of the live chat, like I see a few of you sweaty tryhards already down there, go ahead, smash that like button for the SHIPIT Nation crew here and subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Before we hop on in, I'll say hi to any of you sweaty tryhards down there. We got Sean, welcome on in, who it looks like he's going to be sweating Neiman out there. Best of luck out there with your cut sweat. We got Garth, who potentially hit a first round leader on Rose. I saw quite a few people on Twitter and X that also were able to take advantage of that. I don't know how many times he's been that first round leader, but it's been quite a few at this point. So good stuff, Garth. You got Steven there as well. And yeah, I appreciate that, Steven. It is going well over here. Can't complain after day one of the major. It's an absolute blast. I think Rory was making for quite the storyline there towards that back nine and then had that implosion. But it wasn't even just Rory. Had guys like Cantlay have that same kind of thing happen. Neiman, as you heard Sean from earlier. So kind of a common occurrence, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. You had Rose for the plus 6,000 as well. There you go. You got Phil down there, Garth as well. It's been 4 times before that. Yeah, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 times. I thought it was one of those two, Garth. Either way, good stuff out there. We got Joe down there as well, Phil, Yob, and yeah, we'll get to any of your questions that you have here in just a little bit. But before we do so, I want to talk about the course conditions that we had for round number 1. And I believe there's a group to go out there and still finish. So technically, some movement could happen with these averages. But when we split it by the quote-unquote waves, which no defined waves over here in a smaller field like this, it's the first versus the second half of tee times that you have compared over here in Data Golf. It was a 2/100ths of a stroke difference. So little to no difference out there between the first and second half, which was kind of what I thought was going to happen. Also, I believe what DGen75 was calling for on his emergency stream last night. You had lower winds in the morning, but also some lower temperatures, which I think really made up most of that difference. It was closer to 50 degrees out there at 7 a.m. And then by the time we got to the afternoon, it was in the mid 70s for a lot of that play. So those a little bit more blustery, some holes trickier with that wind direction. You also had the added effect of the ball going further. So I saw players more so going for hole 13 and 2. Hole 15, another par 5, was one that players were hitting it over the green into instead of laying up like some of the morning guys were. So that's why it played to about an even par average here, or even average across the two sides. But for round number 2, I'm not sure it's going to be the same. The wind is still going to kick up as the day goes on, but unlike round number 1, where it went from about 50 degrees in the morning to about 75 degrees in the afternoon, this HRRR model that we're looking at here has it maxing out at about 65, 66 degrees. And if it's only going to be about a 10-degree difference from morning to afternoon, the winds are going to kick up even more substantially than what we had out there for today. Rather than it playing to about an even average, I could see it playing to a quarter to even maybe a half a stroke advantage towards the first half of tee time. So I do think that if you're going to try and split hairs, break ties, even try and get some guys down there in that 6 and 7K range as some flyers towards the very bottom of your player pool, you want to be looking towards some of your early starters. And just to give you an idea, over here on the Masters site, we have the tee times as you'd expect, and it's these sort of guys that I'd be targeting. A Cam Davis in your first group off. All of these guys where for the first, let's say 3, maybe even 4 hours, you're talking about calmer conditions. And though it will be a little bit cooler than what it will be in the afternoon, you still had a lot of guys go out there and score this morning, like a Scotty Scheffler, for example. Just going over here to the leaderboard from today, like a Corey Connors went off relatively early, Terrell Haddon as well. And yeah, the scoring average was about the same, so it wasn't that big of a difference. I more so want to avoid when the golf course is getting firmer as the day goes on, and when those wind gusts and sustained winds are going to become more of a factor in the afternoon hours. And something else to throw out there as well is that they are expecting a little bit of rain overnight. So you can see that over there on the very left over here, about half an inch, maybe a little bit over a half an inch of rain over there from about 1 to 3 a.m. local time, which means that your morning players, though they do have sub-airs here at the Masters, they will try and suck out a lot of that moisture before we get to the first tee time. it's still going to have some residual effects. Like, you're not going to get all the water out of there in just like a 3-4 hour period. So those boarding guys could also have some dartboards to go out there and throw some, close iron shots with, which could be another advantage on top of the winds being a problem for the later starters. So it's not the kind of situation where we have an AM and a PM wave. It's a lot easier to go out there and lean into a weather edge when you have that sort of thing. And this isn't the kind of slate. I mean, today it was literally exactly even. So it's not like this is going to be a massive edge, even if there's going to be one there, maybe half a stroke. So the way I treat those over there in my showdown exposure is I lean on them for the breaking some of the ties. So for example, like if I'm looking at two guys down there in the 6K range, both relatively low owns, both projecting in that same sort of range in terms of projection. If one is AM and one is closer, and by AM, I mean maybe the first like hour and a half of tee times or something like that. And then the other players in like the last hour and a half of tee times, something along those lines, I'm going to take the guy that's going off earlier. So that's more so where I'm leaning into this sort of an edge. Guys like Scotty Scheffler, who are going to be teeing off later on, aren't being excluded from my player pool, right, just because they have a slightly later tee time. And, the reason for that is even some of your earlier tee times, like the guys going off before 9 a.m., are still going to have some wind to contend with. They're still going to have slightly cooler temperatures. You're looking at, like, at most, probably a half a stroke advantage. So we always talk about the weather, something that we love to deep dive over here when we're trying to be a sweaty tryhard, but you don't want to overdo it when it comes to some of these showdown slates as well. And I think if you went all in on that, that could be the narrative. That could be, what you try and make your edge out there for showdown tomorrow. But just know that that is far from a definitive thing, right? If you're playing that sort of edge, just know that you're taking a chance on the weather forecast, maybe actually panning out a little bit differently than what they're forecasting for here. And that's totally okay. Like, that can be the stance that you're taking out there in GPPs. But if you're going out there and playing lineups thinking that you have this massive edge by going after some of these early starters, I would say that in most cases that is probably not going to be the case. So that's the weather perspective. And now we're going to talk about some shots gained metrics, which is usually what I use to go out there and build a majority of my player pool, but it's not the end all be all. So we're going to talk about some ownership when we get to actually building some lineups together later, and also some other things that you can use to find your player pool out there for round two, because there's a three-pronged process that I have for every single slate. I look at the weather. I see if there's any massive impact from that perspective. I look at the shots gained metrics to go out there and help me build a player pool. And then the last aspect is incorporating game theory into the process and making sure that I have enough leverage in my lineups. It's real simple. The middle step, building the player pool, is the one that obviously takes the most time, the most effort, because the last step, getting enough leverage in your lineups, incorporating game theory, can be done by an optimizer. You can just set a product ownership cap. If you're building by hand, right, just throwing in two lower owned guys out there into a lineup, where you're going to be spending a lot of your time over here in your process tonight is figuring out who to go out there and play. And, some people will just play complete game theory out there for rounds 2 and 3 showdown, which if there's a spot to do it, rounds 2 and 3 showdown is the spot to go out there and just play some game theory. But I like some game theory mixed in with a little bit of process as well. And everyone's process is going to be a little bit different for what they're looking for in players, but you should have a process out there for any given slate. My process is the same for every single round 2 and 3 showdown slate. I look for 4 things in players. I look for ball striking poppers. So that would be players from round number 1 that gained both off the tee and on approach. Now you've got to consider that those kind of players are going to be chalky by default, because a lot of people like getting to guys that played well with their ball striking. But in general, if a guy gained stroke and a half, 2 strokes out there in the off the tee and approach categories, that is massive in my process. So that's one way I get to a player. Another way I get to a player is with their course history. And at a golf tournament like this, Masters that has some of the stickiest course history of all time, and it's going to be an even bigger part of my process out there for tomorrow. I also look for high upside players. So high upside players are players with a high birdie or better percentage. You can find that over there on the PGA Tour site. Pretty much every database out there is going to have birdie or better percentage searchable, and also par 5 scoring, because if you know anything about DraftKings DFS, which of course, right, this is the showdown live stream here, we're trying to build for DraftKings lineups, even FanDuel, if you're playing over there on that site. I don't know how much showdown they're doing these days, but you guys get the point. We're looking for guys that can make a whole lot of birdies, because that's how you actually score DraftKings points, by getting streaks. Maybe a bogey-free round is a way to get an extra boost out there, but to get to the 50 to 60 point mark, which is what you need to go out there and break the slate, Rose today, right, got to about 60 fantasy points, I think a little bit over that actually, out there for round one showdown. You've got to make like 8 birdies like he did today, right? It's not easy to go out there and do that sort of thing. And there are certain players that are more aggressive than others that have a high birdie percentage, that outscore their placement over there in DFS, that might finish top 25 in a lot of PGA Tour events, but he's always towards the top 10, top 15 out there in fantasy scoring because he's one of those extremely aggressive players. So I look for those out there in rounds 2 and 3 showdown because raw scoring is the name of the game. That is quite literally what we're trying to optimize on over there in our lineups. So why not look for that out there in our player pool? And I do that for form heading into the event, right? So that's not a stat that I'm looking at out here with the shots gained metrics. Obviously, the course history as well, right? That's not something I'm looking at over here with the shots gained. And those are the kind of things I was mentioning before that you add on top of what we're about to do here with the deep dive on the stats. And then the last thing I look for is another stat thing that we're about to deep dive here together, and that would be short game regression. So those are players that lost a bunch of strokes around the green and with the putter, and that might be due for a little bit of a bounce back out there the next day. And the reason why we're looking for guys that are well into the positive over there with their iron play and off the tee play is that that part of golf is a lot more consistent. And you've probably heard this spiel from me 1,000 times now if you've been watching these live streams for every single round. But I know on Masters Week, we're going to have a lot of people that maybe are a little bit newer out there to the showdown process. So I like to go over some of the DFS 101 when we have one of these bigger events. And when you have ball striking stats like off the tee approach, there's a reason why every tout out there in history, every single podcast, wherever you guys listened or watched this week out there for your content, probably just had a boner out there for the shots gained approach, right? A hard on for it. That's all they probably talked about out there for every single player. There's a reason for that because it's the most predictive stat that we have out here in the PGA Tour. Off the tee is close number 2 behind that out there for consistency from golf tournament to golf tournament. The short game stats, on the other hand, that would be around the green and putting. So the stuff when you're getting closer to the green, as the name would imply there, those categories are a lot more variant. And it's not just variant out there from event to event. It is extremely variant from round to round. So when we're going to go through here in a minute and you see somebody like Rose that gained 5 shots gained over there with the putter, it is extremely hard to believe that he's going to go out there and do that on back-to-back days. Now, are there exceptions to the rule where players go out there and can manage to have spike rounds and back-to-back days? Yes, but they're extremely rare. And we've done this exercise a million times here in the live stream before, going through countless examples of guys that have that big pop day and then come back down to earth the next day. And the opposite is true as well. If you lose a bunch of strokes over there in the categories, and those are the short game regression candidates that I'm looking for, the guys that lost a bunch in both of those categories, even if you just have a neutral day the next day, and what I'm really looking for are guys that hit the ball well or even just decently and then lost over there in the short game categories. Let's say that they're neutral the next time around, right? They don't even go out there and gain in either of those two categories. If they still hit the ball decently, like they did out there in round number 1, then those could be really good plays out there for the next day. So that's my process for building a player pool. It is, like I said, the exact same for every single slate, which is what you ideally want to get to if you're going out there and playing DFS long term. I'm a pro. I'm somebody that does this for every single slate. I have a proven process, something that works for me out there in the contest that I'm entering, to go out there and figure out who to play. Now, based on the kind of contest that you're entering, like maybe you're a cash player, maybe you're somebody that only plays in like the big GPPs like me. If you're in the big GPPs, maybe you have a similar type of process to what I'm looking for. But, if you're playing cash, some of the smaller field stuff like single entries, maybe you have to adjust what you're looking for a little bit to account for that. And right, there's other things like the SHIPIT Nation Stone, that of course over there on the SHIPIT Nation site, where you can look for like some round 2 historical stats. You can look for things like the approach series, the putting series over there as well. And I'm sure there's a million other stats out there that you probably heard from touts over there on Twitter, YouTube, podcasts, all of that I was saying before, that you could incorporate into your own process. So we're going to go through what I look for out there in players here together here in a second. But I did just want to set the table with what I do out there for any given slate in case this is the first time that you're hopping by one of these live streams. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this now. If you have any player deep dives that you guys want me to do, go ahead and let me know. Because what we're going to do here as we're first going to go through each of these different categories and give you guys an idea of some of the poppers, or we actually might wait to do that until after we go through a few questions. But yeah, we're going to go through that process just to show you what that looks like when trying to find ball striking poppers and trying to find short game regression candidates. And then we'll tie it all together with some strategy as well. But let's catch up on chat. I'm sure there's a lot down there. It's the Masters. Yeah, chat is blowing up, which you love to see over here for the majors. So where'd we leave off? We got Phil down there. Yob says, did Lucas Glover eat the same breakfast spot as Henley? Yeah, they probably got the shits or something like that. But yeah, that's golf for you, especially at a major championship course. Morikawa is a no-show so far. Yeah, so far is the key word there, Rodney, but I faded. So if it's going to be 4 days of even par golf, then I'll be okay with that. What's going on? Prep says, longtime viewer, just joined my Patreon page. Let's have a weekend. Love to hear that, Prep. Glad to have you on board over there. Yeah, he's doing decent on the leaderboard. He wasn't elite, but he's in fine shape. Yeah, I agree with that too, Paul, right? Like, he's not paying off the 10K price tag, but he's also not plus 18 like you have there with Nick Dunlop. Yeah, Johnny Rahm not having the best start, but it's only 25% of the way through. So if you're a big Rahm investor, I wouldn't be too down on that sort of thing. What's going on, Brian? He said, good day for kicking the nuts and Showdown. You'd love to hear that. Pretty decent day in kicking the nuts. I didn't play Showdown myself, so I'll just be dipping my toes in for the first time tomorrow. Sweaty tryhard is an appropriate term when money is involved. It should be if you're playing PGA DFS, man, because if you're not putting in all the work that you possibly can, trying to beat the rest of your competition, then you're probably not going to find the kind of success that you're hoping for, because there are people out there like myself and that watch this live stream that are those kind of sweaty tryhards that are willing to put in that kind of work. So yeah, maybe you didn't get what we were talking about when we were mentioning that sort of term, but that's what we mean, right? We're putting in that work, going out there, doing things that are above and beyond, like looking at pin locations, weather edges, right? We don't just look at them tonight and then that's the last time that we look at the weather, right? Sweaty tryhards, like a lot of the people over there at SHIPIT Nation, my website, what I run over there on my Patreon page in Discord, look at the weather before lock in the morning, right? And some of them West Coast sweaty tryhards that we have out there that are waking up at freaking 5:30, 6 a.m. to go out there and check the weather, because it matters if you want to beat the rest of the people out there. So for us around here, that's a badge of honor, that sweaty tryhard moniker there. What's going on? Mark says, seems like the world and his wife there were on Justin Rose. Yeah, dude, for sure. I saw so many tickets on Twitter X, but I got to say, I love that, right? I love a community win. I wasn't there myself. I did think about it. I just thought the trend was too good to be true, right? He had all those first round leaders. I saw so many people betting it. I'm like, yeah, I get that. Okay. I can see why those people are betting that. But I also thought it was too easy, so I didn't get there myself. So yeah, I guess there's no such thing as being too easy, right? I guess it's just a good bet. What's going on? Nick Dunlop, or he could. Plus 18, that would be the ultimate or he could. But I think we've learned at this point that you can't eliminate anyone depending on their mindset and what they're trying to accomplish. A lot, and it's a multiple time tour winner and Nick Dunlop, he could definitely go out there and shoot something better. People were pushing Rose for like 4 or 5 days. They certainly would. In fact, round one Showdown, I saw he was over like 10 to 15% ownership and a lot of the contests. So it wasn't even just the first round leaders. People played him for round one Showdown too. Yeah. Dunlop at plus 20, dude, when he was plus 14 through, I think it was 13 holes, I think I called the fact he might shoot 90, and it's not a good call because I love Nick. He's one of my favorite young up-and-coming prospects that we have out here on tour. So a tough scene to see that kind of day from him. Everyone Dunlapped Nick on the leaderboard. I'll see what you did there. Dunlapped him out there. Yeah, I think he's just going to have himself a day tomorrow, try and maybe make 5-6 birdies, that sort of thing. If it's 5-6 birdies in a +5 round, so be it. If it's 5-6 birdies in a -6 round, then even better, right? Everyone's giving shit to Dunlop. Hey, I guess you deserve it if you shoot 90, but we're not going to dwell on that one. I don't want to further piss on him more, right? He's already in his grave at this point. Straka had a stroker. He certainly did. I've got to say I'm kind of glad about it because I did fade him this week, but even those guys at +6, +7, they could make the cut if they shoot something like -3, because with that weather we have, I personally have the cut at least +4, maybe even getting to +5 if the winds are getting nasty out there in the afternoon. Straka and Henley, yeah, those are the two chalk bombs so far. Every year, going to get some chalk bombs, usually some chalk that gets there as well. And just looking at the leaderboard, I guess Corey Connors would be one of the pieces of chalk that's gone there so far. And then, wow, I just realized this bet the number is really far behind, when it comes to some of these shots gained metrics here. We might have to go to Data Golf to look at the shots gained if they're going to think that somebody like Akshay is still -2 and only through hole 10. So we'll get to that here in a second, though. You feel like Justin Rose fade is where you're at for sure. I'm not playing him tomorrow. He gained 5 strokes putting, so that's really the big issue for me. And also, anytime he's had that really good first round leader lead, he's normally fallen off quite heavily the next few days. The Scotties and Euros lineup is off to a good start. Interesting, Paul. I feel like there's a few other events where that's worked out too. So yeah, maybe the Masters is another one. Yay or nay on Matt McCarty? Entire time you were looking at his stats, you thought he was Denny McCarthy. Yeah, man, he's a good putter, so it's not that out of character for him to go out there and do that. But I'd rather it be the ball striking that's carrying McCarty. And I gotta say, early on, he was hitting some darts. So I don't know if it was all short game that when he went out there today, as you're kind of saying with the Denny McCarthy impression. But in general, love him for this golf course. I played him, as you guys probably know if you watched my live stream yesterday. But we'll see if he can keep it up. There's so much golf left. Yeah, people do this shit for a living, not you, though. Yep, 100%. I mean, that's what I do. So it's certainly possible. You just have to put in the time and effort to do it. It's definitely not an easy thing. And there's losing months, losing weeks for sure, even as a pro player. JT is going to be shooting the course record in round 2. It's like the last 2 tournaments. That'd be pretty sweet. That's I'm definitely getting there for my showdown lineups. He'll be average to below average ownership. And you give me a world-class birdie maker like JT, I'll always buy the dip on that sort of player. You misunderstood. Your sweaty chart is what people do when money is involved. Oh yeah. I don't really get what you're saying there, Garth. You're saying like, don't understand people that try to min cash. No one here tries to min cash. So I don't know what kind of tangent you're going off on, but alrighty, man. What's going on, Greg? Finally beat the guy McLovin in a single entry. Dude, everyone hates McLovin. I mean, he's the best DFS player out there. He plays the most volume, at least. I'm not saying he's got the best ROI percentage. I'm sure he doesn't, with the kind of volume that he's throwing out there. But yeah, dude, everyone hates that guy. And I know it's not like they actually hate him, right? It's like a respect thing. It's like, damn, right? He always beats us. But yeah, he's a really good DFS player. Grant says, how much am I weighing course history? Quite a bit, Grant. In fact, like I'm going to have a whole subset of my player pool that are only course history guys that, I mean, they could have been utter dog shit out there today. They could have lost strokes across all 4 categories. If they have got good course history because of how sticky it is at Augusta, they're a perfect bounce back candidate, because if they did lose across all 4 categories, they shot like +5, +6, which is most likely the case, right? If you're doing that sort of thing, then no one's going to use them. I mean, like a Straka Henley, I mean, no one wants to use those kind of guys out there tomorrow. And it's still Straka and Henley. They're still very chalky plays this week because of the form they had heading in. Those are the kind of guys that with course history I'd be getting on. And I guess Straka's kind of course history guy, right? He's had a decent start here his last 2 times out. But especially with guys like a Finau, right? He could be a bounce back candidate. We'll mention a few. Deep dive on Freddie Couples, not something you thought you'd be asking for. Yeah, he chipped in a few times. So I'm imagining this is all short game that we're going to see. And yeah, that's exactly what it was, right? He lost ball striking and then gained like 4 strokes short game. I think everyone knows that Fred Couples is very likely going to shoot over par tomorrow. And that's a perfect illustration of why. And, you know, if you're a regular PGA Tour player, right, and you had a similar stat profile to this, you can see why I wouldn't have as much confidence as that sort of player heading into round 2, because for Fred Couples to go out there and shoot -1, he had to have everything go right. Multiple chip-ins, multiple long birdies, but I love to see it. He's probably the nicest guy on tour. Hole 15 killed 50% of the golfers. Yeah, dude, that was crazy, that par 5, but a lot of birdies out there too. Any chance people can contend with 5 of 6s? Yeah, it'll depend on like the 6 of 6 rate. The 6 of 6 rate, sometimes at the Masters, it's like 25%. Then you're going to have the winner, probably another top 5er, to have any chance of a min cash. But yeah, you're probably going to be okay if you have the winner. You're going to have a hell of a lineup with that 5 of 6. But unless it's like a 30% 6 of 6 rate, if it's 30% 6 of 6 rate, he might be dead. McCarty looking good. He is, but only 1 round. So let's give him 4 more or 3 more. What you saw from Aubert was impressive. Dude's going to win the tournament. Yeah, at some point in his career, I think he's going to win all 4 majors. I don't think that's a hot take. Certainly going to win a U.S. Open or PGA Championship at some point of his career. Open, Masters are the 2 that I think are a little bit more up in the air. And based on what we've seen so far from him, though, it's hard to bet against that. Do I think that Ballister is getting banned from Augusta? Okay, so yeah, let's have the talk there. He pissed in Rays Creek. I think there's probably a conversation about it going on. I think they're at least going to reprimand him, right? They're going to take him into a room and say, you do this again, you're going to get banned. But do I think he's actually going to get like punished? No, I don't. because he didn't seem to think it was a problem. So it's hard to ban somebody when they didn't like consciously do something wrong, right? Whereas like if he had gone out there like he knew it was disrespectful, that sort of thing, then you probably ban the guy. So yeah, I don't think he will get banned, but funny situation for sure. I mean, just think about the audacity you have to go out there at the Masters. They have cameras everywhere, and to take a piss in Rae's Creek. I mean, that's just, I don't know, it's funny stuff, man. It's like, sounds like something I'd do at the Muni 20 beers in on Sunday. Like we're playing like drunk golf or something. You know, every hole lost, you have to shotgun a beer, that sort of thing. That's the kind of shenanigans that leads to pissing in a creek on the golf course, not playing in the Masters as an amateur invite, right? It's not even like this is John Rahm going out there and doing his thing. This is an amateur. This is his first time playing at a big event. Only 10 guys -2 or better, and you've got 7 of them. Sounds like, yeah, you said good start before, huh, Brian? You weren't lying about that. Akshay, a fade for round 2 based on ownership. Thank you as always. I'm not sure he's going to be super chalky, Alan, so I'm not 100% sure about that. Let me check on where he's actually finished. So he did finish over there at -2. Yeah, he will probably get some ownership. I didn't know if he finished at -1 even. He actually surprised me there at -2. So yeah, he'll probably be a fade for me just because of how he played. And I played a bunch of them main slate, so I'm okay fading that. Aberg was 6.7% in the $10. Yeah, the leverage on him up top was crazy this week. It was closer to 10% in a lot of contests, but yeah, if you got 6.7%, that's even better. Very Couples, the first under par round since 1983. Yeah, I don't know. Was it actually his first since then, or was it his first one? Was it 1983? I think it was his first one, right? Was that first one? Was that like almost 40 years ago? Actually, a little bit over 40 years ago. That is crazy. Yeah, Rose is the man. Thoughts on McIntyre and Cantlay? So perfect bounce back candidates. Kind of guys that were chalky heading into this week, especially McIntyre. He was extremely popular in that lower end of the 8K range. He's a really good bounce back candidate. And then Cantlay too. I don't think he's a bad option. Glover, Zal deep dive. So yeah, let's go through the shots gain metrics first, guys, before I go through any of those player deep dives, because we're probably going to talk about a bunch of them when we do this year. So I'll get to any of those player deep dives here in a second. But the first thing I like to look at, as I was mentioning before, are these approach stats. I go through the guys that were popping in that category. Matt McCarty up here towards the top. So I know I thought it might have been a little bit of putting before, but not really, right? I mean, he gained 2 strokes approach. So I liked him heading into the week. He's -1, so he will be getting a little bit more attention than what he was for main slate. Main slate, you were looking at sub 3% ownership. Now he's probably close to that 3-4% ownership mark. And I haven't ran my projections yet. You guys know over on my Patreon page, those projections over there for my site. But I can tell you, just based on algorithm, right, the experience I have with running these showdown projections, that McCarty isn't going to be over 5%, right? Even if he's -1, he's down there at the bottom end of that 6K range. Those kind of guys only get so much steam to go out there and begin with. And no one was talking about him this week. I mean, I think I was the only human being in existence that even had like thought about mentioning him as a play this week. And I know it's early, but he looks like a pretty good course fit here. And it's partially that lefty narrative that got me on him here, but he's a really good short game player. And he's also a player that recently had been hot with the irons. And anytime you win in your first few starts out there on the PGA Tour, I mean, Jake Knapp did that. I mean, he's been solid ever since then, especially here in 2025. Matt McCarty won in his first 3 starts out there on the PGA Tour. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rule. Garrett Higo, probably the main one that comes to mind for me, right? He won his like second start out here on the PGA Tour, Palmetto Championship, if you know, out there on good old Garrett Higo. But outside of him, most of these guys are absolute studs. So like, if you're telling me he lost with the putter and gained on approach, like that feels like somebody I might just go back to, even with slightly higher ownership. Guys like hadn't really hit the ball well in approach. Same thing with Matt Fitzpatrick. But players like Hideki that are a little bit further down the leaderboard. And I got to double check because it does look like it's throwing me off here with them saying that they're only through like 12 holes and whatnot. But I do believe that Hideki did finish at +1. Let me just confirm that over here. So yeah, he did finish at +1. These scores are live as of where they are right now. Like gaining 2 strokes approach and then just kind of being neutral to 2 short game categories. That's the sort of player that I'd be looking for a bounce back. And I do want to double check the data golf ones over here, because if it is only saying it's through 12 holes, I do think there's a chance the shots gained metrics are still updating. So let me see what we have for some of these guys over here. So let's go to Hideki first and compare them. So yeah, it's different across both sites, isn't it? So it's like, which one is correct? Now, this one says it's through all 12 holes. If you go down here to the shots gained breakdown, it does look like they have the shots gained for all the different holes on here. So for the shots gained, at least as of right this second, some of these websites, databases are probably going to have to update some of these. Let's go over here to Data Golf and use this one because I do think it looks a little bit more complete over there. And look at that, McCarty even better the approach play, gaining 3.6 strokes approach. That is, like I said, I thought it was great at 2.1. He gave me 3.6 strokes approach, and it's going to be even harder to not want to play him. Guys like Harris English, you can see over there, gained 3 strokes approach, but lost. Well, actually, it was about neutral over there with the putter. It was Garcia that I saw over there losing strokes with the putter. In fact, almost 3 strokes over there on the greens, but gained nearly 3 strokes over there with his iron play. Terrell Hatton gained just under 3 strokes approach when it was about neutral over there with the putter. You could say that almost all these guys towards the top, like especially Garcia, right, that lost nearly 3 strokes putting, this would be a short game regression candidate right there, right? Somebody that even if he was just a neutral over there in that category would be, a huge benefit, right? He'd go out there and he'd be nearly 3 strokes better. Now, the other thing that Sergio Garcia is, and he's here at T27, so I don't think he's going to be as popular as some of the other guys starting up there in the top 10, but he's also a ball striking popper because he's got the approach play, he's got the off the tee play, he's also got the around the green play. Now, he's also a course history guy. I mean, he's a champion around Augusta National, and he's a high birdie percentage guy on the Live Tour, and he's a good par 5 scorer. So I mentioned, right, I was looking for 4 things. All 4 of those things that I just mentioned right there, Sergio Garcia, I can tell you for 100% certainty, is going to be in my player pool, and there's a good chance that he's my highest exposed play over there in that portion of the board. So, for that 7K range, I believe he's like in the middle of the 7K range now. I'm out there for round 2 showdown. I got a little bit of a price increase with how popular he was out there for main slate. He'll probably be the guy that I'm playing in most of my lineups, like 35% of my lineups of that portion of the board, because he checks every single box that I'm looking for. So you don't even have to just find like one reason to go out there and play guys. Like if you have a Garcia that checks at least 3 of the 4 boxes, and, maybe I was kind of stretching it a little bit by saying he's like a high upside golfer. That's like 50-50, would say on Sergio. I was definitely kind of stretching it out there with that category, but he for sure, rock solid, at least checks 3 of the 4 categories that you're looking for. Those kind of guys, you might want to bump up out there in your process. And somebody like Justin Rose, right? It wasn't like he was terrible ball striking. He did lose off the tee, but he gained nearly 3 strokes over there in approach. The reason why you might want to kind of give him a bump down, even though he is quote unquote a ball striking popper, is because he gained 5 strokes putting. That is highly unlikely to go out there and happen again, right? Due to come back down to earth a little bit. These are the kind of things that you should be thinking about out there in your process. So going through some of these other approach poppers, and by the way, I can actually just add ball striking onto here. So 1 second. Yeah, here it is. Let's add ball striking. Yeah, we're good with that. That's the main category that I want to bring up there. So Sergio, number 1 of the field in that category. Look at Rory here. Rory, number 3 in shots gained ball striking. We know about the chip into the water. That was probably 2 shots gained lost there on that 1 shot alone. I believe 17 might even been, another half a stroke that he lost around the green there. And then the putter was also ice cold. He lost about a stroke there. He's got a morning tee time, right? He was a later tee time today. Going over to those, he's not one of the first 3 groups off or anything like that, but where is he at? Early-ish tee time over here at 9:58 a.m. So compared to the guys that are teeing off at like 1, they're going to be dealing with blustery conditions the entire afternoon. Now he's got slightly advantageous conditions from that perspective. And when we go over here to these shots gained metrics, he's got multiple things going on. He's got that ball striking popper that we're looking for, short game regression. His course history is decent here as well. I know he hasn't won around Augusta, but he has a lot of top finishes around here. And if you're looking for a high upside player, I mean, he's like one of the highest birdie percentage players that we've had on tour over the last 5 seasons. And he's one of the best par 5 scorers that we have out there on tour as well. So these are the kind of things that I'm mostly looking for out there in my player pool. Aubert towards the top end of the board there. And I know I kind of shit on Matt Fitzpatrick, but I mean, this stat profile is beautiful. Gaining 3 strokes out there with the ball striking stats, losing about a half a stroke over there in the short game categories. He's had a really rough stretch lately, and that's why I'm kind of hesitant to want to play a Matt Fitzpatrick. But this stat profile is the most optimism that we've had for him in like half a year. I mean, it's been a long time since Matt Fitzpatrick has played golf to his standards. This kind of shots gained profile, though, is his bread and butter. Just a really consistent ball striker, usually a pretty good short game player as well. So if he can rectify that tomorrow, he could be a really good play. Patrick Reed called his putting terrible today. He said that he left his putter over there in Miami. You can see that kind of holds up when you look at the stats. He gained 3 strokes ball striking, which if you think that you would think that if Patrick Reed gains 3 strokes ball striking, that he's probably going to shoot like -5, -6. So that's why he mentioned the putter being so cold. So imagine if he can have just a little bit of a better day there. Tommy Fleetwood lost 3 strokes over there with the putter. He was also solid out there ball striking, getting nearly 3 strokes in that category. Will Zalatoris, he also chipped the ball into the water. I believe that was a hole 13 where he had that mistake. So right there, that's about 2 shots gained lost that you had on that hole. And then you also had a cold putter to go out there on top of that. So, these are like the nuts plays where you can kind of combine the ball striking and the short game regression stuff together. And then like even a Will Zalatoris, Patrick Reed's the same thing here, right? Course history guy. Will Zalatoris, course history guy. So, if you were building with my player pool process, and that doesn't have to be yours, right? I always like to give you guys the perspective of a pro player, what I'm doing out there for a slate, just to, give you bits and pieces that you maybe incorporate into your process. They're also course history guys, right? So they check 3 of the 4 boxes that I'm looking for. These are the kind of guys I'd use in like my big single entry, like a Sergio, a Patrick Reed, a Will Zalatoris. Like they're going to be in prime consideration for that sort of play because they're exact kind of guys I'm looking for. And like, especially a Willie Z there at T51, right? He's not going to be chalky. Like a Willie, a Patrick Reed, even a Sergio there at T27, they're going to be probably at least 10% owned. Like they were chalky heading into the week. They played decently today. I don't think that they're going to be overlooked. A Will Zalatoris, though, like that could be a real leverage spot. Like he could be sub 10% owned over there in that 8K range, which could be massive for getting different to the rest of the field. So outside of approach, just ball striking in general, we can look at some of the short game regression candidates. So first off, these would be guys that actually get a tick down over there in my exposure because they gain too much over here in the short game categories. Like very unlikely that Tom Hoge is going to gain nearly 4 strokes putting again. Graysomen's a really good putter. Same thing with Rose, but they putted way above their baselines there at 3 and 5 shots gained respectively. And Scotty Scheffler, look at that, 3 shots gained putting. That's not going to happen again. In fact, that's a massive red flag with him also gaining well over a stroke there around the green. So I didn't realize that was Scotty. So maybe somebody I've got to consider fading out there for tomorrow. And he's -4. I played him for main slate. So even if I fade him and if he has a nuke round, it's not the end of the world because I have some of that other exposure. So really good chance that I'm fading a lot of these guys towards the top. It's like Corey Connors, right? He gained over 4.5 strokes over there between those 2 categories. And maybe not as much some of these guys that are closer to like 1.5, 2 shots gained. They still get a tick down out there in my exposure. But it's really these guys that went nuclear in these categories are the ones that I'm mostly worried about. So around the green, it's the same thing. Like a McNeely, a Cam Smith, a Rye, Batia, Couples, right? We mentioned that one out there earlier as well. All got a little bit lucky in this category. And in Aubert, McIntyre unfortunately got lucky there too, which is makes McIntyre not a terrible play because he also lost a bunch of strokes around with the putter, but it kind of makes up for that. It nullifies that short game regression a bit. So that's what I'm looking for in those categories. And the vice versa is true, right? If you take a look at the guys that lost a bunch of strokes out there in these categories, you could try and find a regression candidate. And what I usually like to say about these categories is that you don't just like blindly play the guys that sucked in these categories, right? Because it's not the fact that they sucked in the categories that's good. What you're looking for are guys that in the 2 ball striking categories kept their shit together. You don't have to be a lead in that category or else you probably already would have played them, right? When you were looking through the ball striking stats before. But what you're looking for are guys that were serviceable out there with the ball striking stats, and that if they're neutral or even gain over there with the short game stats, could have a massive turnaround. So a great example of this sort of player, and can I add the short game on here? Let me see if that's a thing. No, so it doesn't look like short game is a thing over here on this data golf spreadsheet, which is kind of unfortunate. I wish they had it on Bet the Number as well. That's something that these sites should try to invest in at some point. But like something to look at here, like a Brooks, right? He gained in the 2 ball striking categories, but lost 2 strokes around the green. Somebody like a Lawrence, he gained in the 2 ball striking categories, but lost about 6 strokes over there with the short game. And holy shit, Lawrence, I mean, he's been allergic to success this year. So I'm not so sure about him actually turning it around, or Dunlop for that matter, at that shot plus 18. And if Brooks would be a much more reasonable player, a Sepp Straka with the form that he had coming in, right? He lost 5 strokes with the short game, but he gained almost 2 strokes over there with the irons. So these are the kind of guys that I'm looking for a little bit of a bounce back. Like a Cantlay, he's one of those kind of players. Who else here? And Adam Schenk, I guess, losing nearly 2 strokes in that category. And then you go to the putting, you can do the same kind of thing. You look at these 2 categories to the right and you go, Tommy Fleetwood, a good bounce back candidate. Sergio, as we were mentioning before. Ballister Barrio, if you're somebody that believes in this kind of process, could be a play out there for round 2 showdown. And I'll say that he's a long player. He's got all the firepower that you'd want when it comes to birdie or better upside. He had a lot of lip outs today. That's part of the reason why he lost so many strokes putting. Definitely a player that I'm going to consider for my player pool. So that's how I use the shots gained metrics out there to my advantage. Doesn't have to be the only thing that you're using. I mentioned course history. I mentioned high upside birdie makers, good par 5 scores. On the stone, you've got things like the approach series, the putting series. You've also got round 2 historical, right? So just how people play over there on Fridays, they could all use to go out there and build your player pool. So just have a well-rounded process to go out there and build your pool, and don't pick names out of a hat, right? That's my one pet peeve when it comes to PGA DFS, seeing people do content, put out player polls, all that kind of stuff, is when they don't have reasoning for what they're doing. You should always know why you're playing who you are. It's part of the reason why on my Patreon page, the content that I do out there for my people, I not only do projections, modeling, all of that, but when I do my player poll out there for Showdown, I give the exact reasoning for why I'm playing every single player, right? It's not like a paragraph, that sort of thing. I just use the tags, right? I mentioned the 4 reasons before: course history, ball striking, short game regression, high upside players. It's one of those 4 tags that every single player has. So there's not just like a random guy in my pool that's down as, yes, I'm using that player, and there's no reasoning behind it, right? Your process, I'm not saying it has to be those 4 same things. Absolutely not, right? You should always have your own things that you're looking for in players. That's what makes your process unique and how you can beat the rest of the field out there in any given slate. But you should have that reasoning thought out. Just that's the one thing I'll say out there with your player pool selection is I'm not going to give you too much feedback, too much shit for what you're actually using to go out there and build your player pool, just that you have a process to go out there and do so. So let's go back over here to the shots gained metrics. I'm going to go through any of those player deep dives that you had for me down there in the chat. So any last second ones that you guys want me to go through, go ahead and let me know now, because after we get through the chat, we are going to go through some of the contests over here on DraftKings and build a lineup to tie it all together. But where'd we leave off? So a lot of comments down there. We have Nick down there in chat. Yeah, you were late for sure, but glad to have you now rather than later. So where'd we leave off? So I believe it was about here, right? The thoughts on like McIntyre and Cantlay. I really like Cantlay because of the ball striking stats and the short game regression. McIntyre, good low ownership. Like if you're looking for a pivot, you're going to get that with McIntyre, but I do worry about he was really off today. His game just looked kind of shitty across the board, but we always say, or he could about those sort of players. And especially when they were chalk heading into the week, there's usually a reason why guys are chalk. And with McIntyre's case, it was the form and the course fit. So I think that he's far from dead. By the way, guys, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Glover tomorrow. So Glover, he'd be one of those lower owned players, but kind of like McIntyre that we just mentioned with Rodney. He didn't look great in really any category. I mean, he just was losing across the board. Short game, ball striking wasn't really there either. You're only playing them for the lower ownership aspect and the or he could kind of performance, because those kind of guys do get there occasionally, but they're not going to get there as much as players that have their form under their feet. It's just the ownership that you're getting with that sort of play, right? Like, so if there are other guys in the field that can probably project better and that might play the same, if not better, even if they get there tomorrow, you would say, like, why would you even want to play Glover then, right? Like, why would you take the risk on that sort of player? The answer to that is in large field GPPs, less people are going to use Glover. So if you're in one of those kind of contests, man, you can get to that kind of play. But if you're in like a single entry or a cash lineup, I wouldn't go that far. The Zal deep dive. So we kind of went through that one when we had the shots gained metrics up, but it was all the short game that held him back. So this is the kind of stat profile that screams regression in a positive way. So I think that he sets up well, at least per the shots gained metrics. What's my guess on the 6 of 6 rate? Any chance that those 3 make the cut or accept that they don't have a chance? They could definitely make it. I mean, they got to shoot -3, -2 at the very least to have a chance to go out there and make the cut. But, you know, probably it's too early to say, really, to give you a 6 of 6 percentage. But if you go to Cut Sweats on Twitter, they can give you the current percentage, which I guess would be the best way to go about that. If drinking water from Augusta comes from that creek, oh no, I really hope that's not true. It's probably not, right? They got everything bottled and whatnot. But yeah, the idea that you piss in the creek that's like sacred to the golf course is beyond me. I would never be doing that sort of thing. And he said, that's definitely a fact. We're the only human being talking about Matt McCarty. Yeah, I figured. I don't know who else has the stones to go out there and make that sort of play because, I get things wrong on those kind of guys all the time, but I at least have the stones to go out there and make those sort of picks over here on these streams. So I'm glad that some people like yourself seemingly took advantage of that. Yeah, I got Nick down here late. Hey, better late than never. Everything sheriff. Yeah. Yeah, the sheriff is what we call Nick, by the way. If you guys don't get that reference, you've missed quite a bit. Luckily, you can replay it, as you were saying down there. Where we go? Sergio looked like he was in the hot dog vendor. Yeah, dude. He had the Ronald McDonald outfit on, huh? The bright red, the bright yellow. That's just the Fireballs logo that they have over there from Live Golf. Yeah, if you haven't seen it before because you haven't been watching Live, I'm sure it was quite a funny thing to see out there. Yeah, Sergio's outfit, the other outfits they have for the Fireballs, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be Fireball stuff all week. That's how the Live golfers, I think, are contractually obligated to go out there and dress. I didn't see Brooks out there today. I'm not sure if he was actually following that obligation, but yeah, it's the other outfits for Fireballs are actually fire. Like he's not going to look like a clown the whole weekend. What do I think about Rahm as a bounce back? Looks pretty dejected at times. He always looks dejected, so I wouldn't use that as like a narrative to play him or not. If you were looking at Rahm as a bounce back because he's played well here, like course history, right, using that as your sort of thing, then play Jon Rahm, right? Don't let that sort of like, reaction from the golf course be the reason that you're not playing them, because guys like Jon Rahm do that even when they're playing well. So actually, my guy, LSU Nick, he's actually down there in chat. Nick Mars, we were talking about that with the Rahm heading into this week, about people getting off of him because him looking annoyed over there on Live. That's just what he does. That's the Jon Rahm show. He's never going to be happy out there, and that's just how some people are. Yeah, Reed said he was putting like a blind man out there. His words, not mine. And we call those the Stevie Wonder reads, Ross. When you're putting like a blind man, I just call my buddy Stevie Wonder, and as I'm sure you guys could probably figure out why that's the case. Homa is actually finding his game. He found it for one round. He's done it for a few rounds at a time, but I'm not sure if I'd call his even or +1 round finding his game. I'd got to see it for an entire event, not just an 18-hole sample size. And yeah, he shot +2. So he's on like the current cut line right now. Not a terrible spot. If we're calling that finding his game, I mean, I think we have just real low expectations out there for Max Homa. So I wouldn't go that far myself. Word on the street is Matty Fitz likes getting shit on. I should not have read that out loud, but that's I cannot confirm nor deny that out there on Matty Fitzpatrick. I will just say that is absolutely hilarious. Hoagie bounce back for tomorrow. I'm with it. He lost a bunch of strokes around the green, I believe. He did also gain a bunch of strokes putting though, so that one is kind of hard to go out there and balance. So I guess you gotta. If the Hoagie Whisperer, by the way, LSU Nick down there is the Hoagie Whisperer. If he's playing them, it might be a decent idea to consider it. Surely Reed can get the exact same putter in 5 minutes on the course we make it. Are you saying this like he lost his putter or something? I don't think that was the case. I think he actually had his putter out there, unless there's some news circulating that I didn't see. Why does Rory hate you? Probably because you played him. But yeah, I empathize with you, man. Sometimes it feels that way with guys that you have in your pool. Do I still use shots gained over the last 12 or 24 rounds for Showdown? Yeah, so that's where I'm looking at like the birdie or better percentage and the par 5 scoring stuff. So my modeling in general is incorporated into my projections, Brian. So that's where a lot of that comes in myself. But yeah, like especially when I'm looking for the high upside players, that kind of sample size is my go-to. Did Bobby Mack tilt balls on number 7? Yeah, I never saw the video from it, but it looks like it from him like 3-jacking from 5 feet. You saw somebody having the stones to play McCarty in the $200 single entry. Yeah, it might be this LSU Nick guy that got some extra intel from this Luke dude that I heard does these YouTube shows on SHIPIT Nation and his own YouTube channel talking about Denny McCarthy. Yeah, I think I saw that one too, Nick. Only 15% of lineups are 6 of 6 right now. Yeah, so 5 of 6 can definitely still have success for sure. I agree with you that there. And yeah, you've still got some hope. Dude, it's only 25% of the way done, right? We don't tilt our balls after 25%, 1/4 of an NFL showdown slate. So they can't be doing it over here on golf either. How do I feel about Lowry? Maybe somebody that can slip through the cracks ownership-wise. Let's look at the stats, because when we were going through them earlier, I don't think he really stood out too much in any one category, which might make him go a little bit under the radar. Good approach stats, -1. So T11 is going to give him some ownership. He's not going to be low owned. I can tell you for sure. It'll probably be about average ownership at the very least. maybe even slightly above average ownership is probably where I'm going to have him projected. But that doesn't make him a bad play, right? Just because you're average, just slightly above average ownership, just means you have to compensate for it in a few other spots. You love Reed. He hit the ball great. Spectacular course history. Yeah, can't even beat it. I mean, he hasn't missed the cut here in how long around Augusta National. Yeah, bring the ball striking from today, and that putter comes around, and it's a nuclear round. You love me, Luke. Ron Burgundy. I'm not sure what that reference, dude. That's going over my head. I'll get back to you, Ross. I'm sure I'll think of it here in a second. Nick never says no to a hoagie. Dude, freaking Nick is insane with the hoagie whisperer. I mean, he doesn't always play them. I mean, he literally, I can tell you for a fact he doesn't always play them because I get to see Nick's player pool a lot before he goes out there and plays. And but when he does play them, he has a really good success rate with it. And then he said Fitz likes a Cleveland's. I'm not saying that. I already know it's probably, I don't even know what that is, but I know it's probably a bad word or a bad thing. And I'm sure it has to do with what Ross was saying before. So we'll leave that one there. All right, let's go through some of this contest selection. So now that we've gone through building a player pool, again, that's going to be where most of your time is spent. So that's why we spend the most time on that section. Weather matters, but next we're going to talk about strategy and game theory, because not only does game theory come in when you're actually building lineups, but it should be a thought process when you're going out there and choosing the actual contest to enter. Because if you look at your player pool, I like building my player pool before I go out there and reserve my contest, and you see that you like a lot of chalk. Like you like the guys in the 7K range. They're going to be like 10 to 15% owned. If you're on those sort of plays and you just can't get off of them, which I would say try and get off those plays if you can. It's round 2 and 3 showdown. It's already an extremely variant, extremely hard to predict sport. You want to lean into game theory as much as possible when we're playing golf DFS, but especially even more so when we're on this showdown kind of format. But if you, for some reason, you've got, like I said, a hard on for a player that has that kind of ownership, then at least don't play in the big $5 or big $25 GPPs. Like this sand trap that has 14,000 other entries, you're playing a guy that's 20% owned and you're sharing them with, I don't know, like 30,000 entries. I'm sorry, like 3,000 entries out there in that sort of contest. Like that's not ideal. You go over here to this contest that has nearly 12,000 entries, right? You play them in, a 25%er up there in that 8K range, and you're sharing it over there with like 3,000 lineups as well. So that's the worry when you're taking players with that sort of ownership, and why, if you kind of had a good idea of your player pool before you go out there and start reserving, you can adjust for that. And, on the flip side, if you look at your player pool and you've got a lot of low owned gems that you like in that 6 and 7K range, and I can tell you after going through the shots gain metrics, there are plenty of those low owned gems out there that you can find out there in your process, then maybe consider some of those GPPs, like that big $5 and $25, leave some salary on the table and really take some shots down there in that 6 and 7K range. So look at your player pool, go through your process, figure out who sets up well out there for the next day, and then mold that around the kind of contest that you're trying to enter. Now, looking at the contest selection, they are some really big contests. So, if you're a fan of Showdown, this is one of the better slates that we're going to have. The big 555 is still really top heavy. Same thing with the big sand trap. It's a third to first place, but I mean, that's always going to be the cases with those big GPPs. They're called lotteries for a reason. This big $250 4max, it is a little bit larger than what we're used to seeing. And the added byproduct is it's still the same prize to first. A lot of times, right, it's only like 35K or 40K, and it's still 10K out there to first place. Now it's only a sixth out there to first place. So it's not a perfect payout structure. We'd rather have it be closer to like 10% that you're getting out there to first place. But I think it's like 18% or whatever it is, close to that over there, out there to first place, is a little bit better than the 30% or even like 33% that we sometimes get out there to first in these big GPPs. So the big $250 4max isn't the worst contest that I've ever seen. Let's see this one here. It's $180 3max. Okay, I've never seen that one before, but that one might have been posted out there for other slates. You have the big $100 long drive. So this one's a 35K total prize pool. It is a 7th over there to first place. So kind of like that other contest that was a 6th to first place. It isn't ideal, but it's a little bit closer to ideal than a lot of those other contests that you're going to find. Let's see, they have the $44. So this is a 16 entry max. Sometimes this is a 12 entry max over there for some of the other showdown slates. It's still super top heavy there with a 4th to first place, but that's a smaller GPP with only about 500 entries. So it's a little bit easier to finish in first in that kind of contest. So, it's hard to have a top heavy contest when you're playing against 14,000 entries, because you know it's going to be tough to finish in first out of 14,000 people. When it's 500 people, though, it's a little bit easier to stomach a top-heavy payout when there's less people that you have to go out there and beat. So that's why the thought process changes a little bit for those. You have this $10 18 max. This is probably the best contest that you can enter for your money. This one, it's $180 the max enter. So a lot of you watching this can probably afford to go out there and max enter this. Right now, everyone's a professional DFS player. In fact, hardly anyone out there that watches these videos is going to be a professional DFS player playing PGA DFS. If you're just doing this as a hobby, you want to go out there, get a couple $100 in out there for Showdown, and you don't just want to have like one lineup, right? You only have one lineup, set of 6 guys that you want to go out there and sweat. That $100 or that $200 single entry is the nuts. They have good payout structure. It's not ideal, but it's close enough to go out there and enter. But if you want a max enter, you want like, a bigger sample size of lineups to go out there and use. This is the best contest to go out there and do it with, because it's 10% of the entire prize pool to first, and then down here to 10th, like DGen75 says, who, by the way, he retweeted the live stream here. Hopefully he's feeling well out there. I saw his emergency stream yesterday. And if you guys were watching that, Justin Rose was a play he gave out as a sleeper, I believe. First round leader. It's hard to get better than that out there for DGen. And the reason why I was mentioning him there is that he's always looking for contests that are 10% to first place and that are 10% of that out there to 10th. And that is literally exactly what we're getting here with this 18 max. So fill that one up if you guys can. In fact, it's already almost halfway full, showing you how much people like that kind of payout structure. But you also have these $12 single entries. Those are always really good contests out there for these kind of slates. This $33 single entry is also pretty good payout structure. Look at this one, right? It's a 10th to first place. It's 20%, so it's double that over there to 10th place. But there's only 300 other entries that you're entering against there. So that's the reasoning why the top 10 payout structure is a little bit different. Those are the kind of contests a lot of you guys should be playing. Like if you're not entering like the 150 maxing the big 25, which a lot of you probably aren't doing for every single slate, those other contests are where you should be focusing on a lot of your attention. In terms of lineup construction, actually going out there and putting together your lineups, it is all about leverage for me. And that's not to say that you can't have a piece of chalk up there towards the top. Like, for example, a Rory with his kind of shots gained profile, gaining ball striking, losing out there with the short game, he's still going to be like 25% owned. You can use that sort of player as long as you've got 2 or 3 other pivots out there in your lineup. So, in fact, what we're going to do here with the lineup that we build together, just to kind of go through the process, is take a little bit more chalk than I'm probably going to in most lineups towards the top, just to show you how I would navigate that and how it would get different towards the bottom. So we're going to start with Rory, and then I'm going to go with Bryson as my second man in. So actually, I want to go a little bit cheaper just so we can be a little bit more balanced with the salary that we use. So I guess Shane Lowry would be the popular guy that we could use here in the 8K range. So let's pop him in there at $8,800. So we've got 20% plus owned Rory. Again, my projections haven't been posted quite yet, but I can confidently tell you he'll be well over 20% owned out there for tomorrow. Shane Lowry, probably at least 12 to 15% ownership. So these two players, you're not really getting different in those large field GPPs with, which means our last 3-4 spots is where all of our leverage is going to come in. And you're probably going to have at least one more player in your lineup here, especially because we still have 7,500 remaining per player. Especially like your top end of the 7K range guy that you're going to throw into this kind of lineup, he might still have some ownership, but you don't want him to be like a Terrell Hatton or even a Jason Day here at -2 that are going to be close to 10%, if not over 10% ownership over there in Showdown. Rather than that, you might want to take a slightly lower owned player, like, for example, a Tony Finau, who's a little bit further down the leaderboard that I might play due to his course history, right? I mentioned that before. He's had a pretty favorable track record here around Augusta National. So maybe you take that route rather than going to your hands. And Akshay, he's -2, right? He's not even par. I've got to refresh this to get all the actual scores on there. But maybe avoid the Akshay just because of the players that you used up top. Now, if you really want to use an Akshay and you want to go back and adjust your lineup, that's where you might want to get off of somebody like a Shane Lowry and consider a pivot like a Brooks Koepka, who we looked at the stats before, ball striking, gaining, losing in the 2 short game categories. He still sets up well out there for tomorrow, but he's a little bit lower owned than what you had there with Lowry. So that's how the lineup construction has to be balanced. You use that same idea throughout the rest of the lineup. So guys like Garcia and Reed, I think they're going to still get some ownership. So like in the big GPP, you might be able to throw in like a Reed or a Garcia here and still get away with it. But if I'm entering against 12,000 or 14,000 other entries, I'm highly considering guys like a Spawn, maybe even go into like a Bradley or a Wyndham Clark for a little bit of leverage, just so that I can get different to the field and actually move up the contest when I have a player hit. And it's real easy to imagine, right? While we talk about leverage, why it matters so much, if you have somebody that's 1% owned and they score 60 points like Justin Rose did, I mean, that is just such a massive advantage to have over the rest of the field, as opposed to today when Justin Rose was like 12, 13% owned, 15% owned out there in some round one showdown contest. When they're 15% owned and you're entering against like 10,000 entries, that's thousands of other people that you have with the same exact player, as opposed to if you can find Wyndham Clark, and the player still has to go out there and perform, right? So it's not easy to go out there and find lower owned pivots, but if you can pull it off, that's why it's such an important aspect to consider. It has so much more benefit than taking somebody with that ownership. So let's throw in a Wyndham Clark there to give us a little bit of that differentiation. Let's throw in a Spawn who's also going to be relatively low owned. And for your last man in, you might want to also throw in somebody that's like average to below average ownership to offset some of that chalk towards the top end of the board. So this would be for like the big 5 or big $25 GPP, where you really have to worry about the rest of the field in a 10,000 plus entry contest. But let's say that you were in like a single entry, something a little bit smaller, maybe something that has, 500 to maybe 1,000 entries at the very most. You could get away with a slightly chalkier lineup. So for example, if you went Rory, Lowry, Bhatia, and then rather than going to the pivot in Clark, you wanted to throw in Garcia because he looks like the nuts on paper. And I guess I couldn't completely blame you for that. As long as you do have a pivot like Spawn in there, maybe one more pivot as your last man in. So maybe you still have Clark in the lineup, right? But you use him as your last man in there. As long as it's in a smaller field GPP, you're probably going to be okay, right? Because you're not entering against 10,000, 12,000 other entries where it's infinitely easier to go out there and duplicate yourself. It's harder to go out there and get leverage and actually move up the leaderboards. You don't have to be as stringent when it comes to that game theory. So that's really the idea. That's the game plan out there for round 2 showdown, guys. It's keep an eye on the weather, right? So if you're that sweaty tryhard mentality, make sure you're waking up before lock and take a look at that last second, because if it looks like it's going to be a really big edge out there towards the early starters, maybe you do go closer to all in out there on that side of it. Like, as of right now, I'm not doing that kind of thing, but make sure you stay on top of the weather. Make sure your player pool, you have a reason for playing everyone that you're using. There should be no one in your pool that is in there for shits and gigs. There's no reason to do so. You have 95 players to choose from. You've got plenty of choices to go out there and make quality plays. And then the last thing is incorporate game theory, right? Make sure that you're getting different to the field. You're giving yourself a chance to actually win in a contest if your players get there. Because the worst thing is when you have like 3 guys go off in your showdown lineup and it's all the guys that are like 20% owned, because you know that there's probably going to be like a solid amount of lineups that have that exact same set of 3 players. And then you have a 3-on-3 versus like a couple hundred other people. And that's really hard to go out there and win with just a 3-on-3. Give yourself a chance to go out there top 5 or take down one of those GPPs when you hit on somebody that's like 1-2% owned and you're not sharing them and holding hands with a whole bunch of old other people. So that's the idea over there in your large field GPPs. Best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are going with. I'll say if there's any last second questions down there in the chat. So if you have any, go ahead and hit me up right now, because we're about to get out of here just in a minute. But smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. And for all the prop and betting content over there for round number 2, make sure to check that out on my YouTube channel. That's going to be on a little bit later on tonight. We're going through the pin locations, stat averages out there from today. And if you guys are on sites like Underdog and Prize Picks, we'll be deep diving all of those boards and how to attack each category, as well as free ball matchups and all of that kind of stuff over there on Sportsbook. So obviously here is the DFS breakdown, giving you guys everything from that perspective. And a lot of you guys, especially because it's the Masters week, are probably dabbling over there from the Sportsbook perspective as well. So if you guys are, passionate on that side, also getting a lot of exposure in over there, make sure to tune into my live stream a little bit later on tonight for that. And as I said, that's on my YouTube channel. So that's going to be over there on the GS LukeDFS YouTube. You can look that up on YouTube and find me over there. It's a GS, and it's I believe it's like dark blue and orange is my logo. So that's how you know that you found me. Or you can find that over there on Twitter/X, and you'll be able to find the same sort of thing. So let me see if there's any of those questions, and then we'll hop on out of here. Yeah, I knew it was from Anchorman, but I didn't know like what you were like talking about with the like reference. I didn't know you were referencing to, but I think I get it now with reading the teleprompter. Yeah, when I'm on these streams, man, it is like I'm reading a teleprompter. It's tough to do with all the comments. There's a lot to go through, which is a great problem to have, right? I'd rather have a whole bunch of comments and too many to go through than a live stream where I'm just talking to myself, right? Which when I first started, trust me, there were live streams where there are only like 10, 15 comments down there. So I know what that's all about. I've been there too, for sure. Where did we leave off? So yeah, a ton of wind tomorrow. You like the great wind players. Yeah, so wind players could be another thing to look at too. I'm not sure if it's windy enough where like I'm looking for those type of players, but like that's my process, right? That's the beauty of PGA DFS. I think that's a really bright thing to go out there and incorporate. And in fact, I hate to like rip you off there, Lori, but I haven't built my player pool yet, and I'm still putting together my projections. There's a chance I throw in a wind category now because I think that's pretty brilliant. I truly do. I think it's brilliant enough to go out there and throw in a few cases. But like I said, I wouldn't go overboard with it because I don't think it's windy enough where it's going to blow everyone off the golf course. But like if there's an extra play or two that you want to get to, you're like, I think in these blustery conditions, he's going to shoot like -2. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Dunlap or he could. He's the biggest or he could that I've ever seen, but I don't know if I have the stones for it. What do I think the biggest sleeper pick is for tomorrow? I haven't really thought about it, man. I haven't built my player pool myself. Based on the shots gained metrics, though, and what we were looking at before, which is usually what I lean on when we get these sort of questions, it'd be one of these guys that gained a whole bunch of ball striking that lost with the putter. So it's probably either Sergio, maybe McCarty, because their stat profile is set up really well. Or if you're willing to go further up the board, I'm not sure if you'd call like Tommy Fleetwood a sleeper because he's costing you in the 9K range. But those are the kind of guys I'd be looking for, man. But hard to say because I haven't built my pool yet. Could shoot under 90 tomorrow. I would hope he shoots under 90 tomorrow. 65 would be a whole lot better, though. Let's see. Got here a little late tonight. Thoughts on Aubert with the ownership? So ownership's going to be higher than main slate. He was single digit in a lot of contests, Robert. I think he'll be closer to the 10 to 15% range tomorrow. So if you're okay with that, then on paper, he looked really good. Gained ball striking was about average to below average in the 2 short game categories. Looks very similar to a Rory McIlroy. I think the X factor for me is that Rory has even more room for regression. Like his short game was horrendous, losing 3 strokes in that category, but Aubert sets up rather similar. How is my kick in the nuts lineups going? I haven't checked since the end of play, right? Because we were live streaming before the end, but it was going okay, slightly below even ROI, which is kind of to be expected with the rake that we have in these contests. But my 6 of 6 rate is looking pretty decent. So we're going to have to see how the morning guys do tomorrow. I have a lot of like the later guys from today and early guys going off tomorrow. And it wasn't even because of a weather edge. That's just how my player pool ended up panning out. I had a lot more guys towards that side. If they score well tomorrow morning and then the later guys kind of struggle, which is what it looks like in the weather, like looks like that might end up happening, then I could really be in a good spot. Ain't no hobby. That's for damn sure. Yeah, Nick is one of the biggest sweaty tryhards that you have out there. And you're saying that would be good for all weeks where the wind is up, Luke. Yeah, that's what I try and do, Brian. There's been a few rounds where I've incorporated the wind stuff, but I only do it on the rounds when it's windy. So like, for example, Farmers Insurance Open on Sunday, I had wind players out there. A few weeks after that, Genesis, so I got windy for one of the rounds around that golf course, Torrey Pines again. Did the same thing, right? Threw out some of those wind players. Yeah, I think situationally, it makes sense in certain slates. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck. I hope to see your names out there towards the top end of those GPPs. If you haven't already hit that like button, what are you waiting for? Go out there and do so before you hop on out of here. And I see you guys out there for rounds 3 and 4 as well.